There's something more explosive than money in a family. Favoritism. Not the cute we love you both equally kind. I'm talking about the subtle, generational, emotionally gaslighting kind that everyone pretends doesn't exist. Today's story is one of those classic internet dilemmas that makes you pause mid-scroll and whisper, "Oh, this is messy." So grab a coffee or whatever drink matches your current emotional instability and stay with me, because this one escalates. Welcome to the channel Lying Whispers. I'm your favorite morally curious narrator, and around here we dissect stories pulled straight from the internet and ask the question everyone's secretly thinking. And today's headline reads, AITA, for cutting off my parents after they chose my brother? Stay until the end, my friends. Because what starts as childhood favoritism turns into a hospital crisis, a disappearance, and a family dynamic that collapses the moment the strong one walks away. Let's begin. She always knew. Not in a dramatic, violin playing in the background kind of way. More like the quiet awareness of a kid who notices patterns before she has language for them. Her brother was the sun she was orbiting. When he got a C, it was framed as progress. When she got straight, as it was that's expected. Small difference, right? Wrong. Because repeated enough, that difference rewires you. Well, call him Golden Boy. Because if irony had a birth certificate, that would be his name. Golden Boy had struggles. Golden Boy needed extra support. Golden Boy was sensitive. If he yelled, he was overwhelmed. If she raised her voice, she had an attitude. If he failed, he needed protection. If she succeeded, she needed humility. And the parents? Oh, they denied favoritism like it was a crime accusation. We love you equally. Sure. And I run a stable emotional household consulting firm. Fast forward to teenage years. Golden Boy begins collecting bad decisions like limited edition sneakers, suspensions, lies, petty theft. The parental response? He's going through a phase. Meanwhile, she learned how to be low maintenance, efficient, self-reliant, invisible in her confidence. Here's the psychological twist, my friends. When a child only gets attention for problems, the problem child becomes the emotional center. And the responsible one becomes background furniture. She didn't cause chaos, so she didn't receive care. And that pattern? It sticks. College years. She earns a partial scholarship, works 2 jobs, pays her own rent. Golden Boy. Tuition covered. Car paid for. Monthly allowance. Guess who drops out second semester because it didn't align with his purpose? Exactly. The parents call it soul searching. They tell her she should be more supportive of her brother. He's lost. Interesting how he's always lost but never financially stranded. Now here's where the story shifts. Because favoritism isn't always explosive. Sometimes it's erosion. Slow. Quiet. Relentless. Until something snaps. She was exhausted. Working over 60 hours a week. Paying for her own therapy. Yes, therapy, because growing up as the emotionally overlooked child doesn't exactly build self-worth in bulk. Then she gets into a car accident. Not cinematic, but serious enough for hospital admission. She calls her parents. Pause. The mother answers and says she can't come because Golden Boy is going through a hard time. He had just been dumped. Let that sit. She's in the hospital. He's heartbroken. The parents choose him. And in that sterile hospital hallway, something inside her shuts down. Not dramatically. Permanently. She doesn't scream. She doesn't accuse. She just withdraws. Stops calling. Stops responding. Stops attending family gatherings. Silence. And the family response? She's being dramatic. She's too sensitive. Ah, yes. Sensitive. The favorite label for anyone reacting proportionally to emotional neglect. Golden Boy texts her that she's overreacting. Of course he does. When you've always been prioritized, equality feels like betrayal. Months pass. She heals alone. Pays medical bills alone. Returns to work alone. And here's the part nobody saw coming. She starts thriving. Without comparison. Without guilt. Without being the emotional backup generator. But families built on imbalance don't like losing the dependable one. So the guilt messages begin. You're tearing this family apart. Your parents are suffering. Your brother needs you. Interesting. When she needed them, they were unavailable. But when she removes herself, she's the villain. And that's when she posts online. AITA for cutting off my parents after they chose my brother? She eventually sends one final message.
Clear. Calm. Direct.
She explains she cannot maintain contact while the favoritism continues to be denied. She needs space. She needs boundaries. The parents respond with outrage. Total denial. And then they suggest family therapy, but only if she apologizes first for abandoning the family. Abandoning. Fascinating how her silence is abandonment, but leaving her alone in a hospital was situational. Patterns, my friends. Patterns. Then she disappears. Changes her number. Deletes social media. Moves cities. Not for revenge. For survival. And suddenly panic. Because one thing is having a daughter who always holds things together. Another thing is realizing she can walk away. Golden Boy tries reaching out through mutual friends. Nothing. Now the narrative changes. She's no longer dramatic. She's missing. And irony? Irony is undefeated. But this is just part one. Because what happens next involves money, inheritance adjustments, parental aging, and a realization that the strong child was never unbreakable, just unsupported. And the real question might not be AITA. It might be, why did she stay as long as she did? Stay with me, my friends. Because in part two, the system collapses. And I promise you the perspective shifts. Oh, my friends.
Yo.
That was just the warning TR. Now, the struct. A year after she disappears, something inconvenient. Not bankruptcy. Not disaster movie chaos. Just enough of a sure. The father loses his job. It's framed as early transition. Translation? Income drops. Reality knocks. And when reality knocks, spreadsheets get opened. That's when the math starts whispering uncomfortable. Years of transfers to Golden Boy.
L.C.R. Bu.
And Harris, the delicious irony. She hadn't received financial help since she turned 18. No tuition coverage. No car. No medical assistance. Nothing. Because she handled herself. And suddenly that narrative doesn't sound admirable. It sounds convenient. Golden Boy doesn't take the financial tightening well. First, he blames the economy. Then bad luck. Then stress. Then subtly her. Ever since she left, everything's been unstable. Oh yes. Clearly the woman who paid her own bills for a decade destabilized the household by not being there. The delusion is almost impressive. But here's where the story tilts. An aunt enters the chat. There's always an aunt. The kind who has watched quietly for years. The kind who remembers childhood dynamics with unnerving clarity. She reaches out to the missing daughter. And yes, she finds her. Because disappearing from people who drain you is easy. Disappearing from someone who genuinely cares? That's different. They talk. And here's the part that shocks everyone. She's okay. Not bitter. Not spiraling. Not obsessing over revenge.
She's calm. Stable job. Therapy.
Healthy friendships. Boundaries. Boundaries, the concept that was apparently illegal in her childhood home. The aunt, half protective and half ready to light a match under family denial, drops a detail. The parents updated their will. Originally, equal distribution.
Now,
a larger portion allocated to Golden Boy to ensure his long-term stability.
Pause.
Let that marinate. Even in legal documents, the imbalance continued. She listens. And she doesn't cry. She doesn't rage. She says something almost surgical. That tracks. Because at some point, favoritism stops shocking you. It just confirms what you already knew. She writes one final letter. Not emotional. Not explosive. Measured. She explains she doesn't hate them. She understands now what her role was. She was the reliable one. The steady one. The one expected to absorb imbalance quietly. And then she writes the line that shifts everything. I didn't leave because I was angry. I left because I was clear. Clarity hits harder than anger. You can argue with rage. You can't argue with someone who sees the pattern and opts out. And now the panic is real. Because for the first time, the parents begin to see the structure without her in it. Golden Boy isn't the strong one. He's the protected one. And protection, overdone, becomes dependency. Without her emotional labor, without her silent stability, the system wobbles. Because she wasn't just a daughter. She was the glue. And glue doesn't get credit until it's gone. Then comes the twist no one planned for. 2 years later, the father falls seriously ill. Not fatal but enough to require long-term care, appointments, coordination, management.
Golden. He does.
But trying is not the same as sustaining. He's overwhelmed, frustrated, short-tempered. The mother, exhausted, realizes something terrifying. The child she shielded doesn't know how to shield anyone else. And now she reaches out again. But the language has shifted. Not your father needs you. This time. I don't know how to do this. That's different. That's vulnerability. She doesn't return physically. But she responds. She helps coordinate professional care. She researches options. She contributes financially quietly. She does not re-enter the emotional battlefield. This is not reconciliation. This is controlled compassion. Because cutting contact doesn't mean losing humanity. It means refusing to resume a damaging role. Meanwhile, something cracks inside Golden Boy. He confronts his mother. Why did you always protect me? That's not accusation. That's realization. And the mother, finally stripped of denial, admits something fragile. I thought you needed more. And there it is. The core of so many favoritism stories. One child labeled fragile. The other labeled strong. The strong one forced into resilience. The fragile one trained in dependence. And neither truly seen. Years pass. There isn't a cinematic reunion. There isn't a dramatic forgiveness speech. There are boundaries. Occasional contact. Measured conversations. The kind where emotional proximity is controlled. Golden Boy starts therapy. Not because of enlightenment. Because life stopped cushioning him. He fails. Learns. Fails again. Adjusts. He begins slowly to understand the privilege he never questioned. And then one day, at a small family gathering, they see each other. No violins. No slow-motion embrace. Just eye contact. He says quietly, I didn't realize how much it hurt you. Not perfect, but real. And she responds, I didn't realize how much being the favorite hurt you. Because hair's the final layer, my friends. Being the favorite can distort you. Being the overlooked one can harden you. Both roles cost something. But only one of them gets romanticized. So now let's circle back. AITA, for cutting off my parents after they chose my brother? Was she cruel? Or was she the only one brave enough to disrupt a system everyone else benefited from? Because hair's what we learned. She didn't leave to punish. She left to survive. And when she came back, if you can even call it that, it was on her terms. Not as glue. Not as backup emotional parent. But as an adult with boundaries. Now I need to know. If you were the strong child, would you stay? If you were the favorite, would you dare question it? And if you were the parent, would you recognize the imbalance before it cost you connection? Tell me, my friends. Because these aren't just stories from the internet. They're mirrors. And sometimes the villain isn't a person. It's a pattern. Oh, my friends, there's always more. Because the real ending of stories like this isn't dramatic. It's subtle. And subtle is where the truth hides. A few years later, the father passes. Not suddenly. Not tragically. Just time doing what time does. The funeral is small. Controlled. Emotionally cautious. She attends. Yes. But not as the prodigal daughter. Not as the fixer. Not as the family's emotional shock absorber. She stands slightly to the side. Observes. Listens. And hair's the thing no one expected. Golden Boy handles most of it. The logistics. The paperwork. The conversations. He stumbles sometimes. Hesitates. But he does it. And for the first time in their entire lives, no one looks at her to step in. That silence? That's growth. Painful, overdue growth, but growth. After the funeral, the will is read. The adjusted inheritance remains. Golden Boy receives more. And this time, she doesn't flinch. Because money stopped being the point years ago. Peace became the currency she chose. And you know what's wild? Golden Boy looks uncomfortable receiving it. Because when you finally become self-aware, privilege stops feeling like a reward. It feels like evidence. Months later, so. He reaches out, not in crisis. Not for money. Not because he's drowning. He reaches out to ask about her life.
Her job.
Her friends. Her routine. No agenda. Just curiosity. And that's the moment she realizes something quietly powerful. He's no longer the Golden Boy. He's just her brother.
Flawed.
Complicated.
Human. And she?
She's no longer the strong one. She's just herself. Without a role to perform. They don't become best friends. Let's not romanticize it. But they build something different. A cautious, adult relationship without parental distortion in the middle. Because here's the truth that makes this story linger. The real fracture wasn't between siblings. It was in the system that defined them. And once the system collapsed, they were free to meet each other without labels. So, is there more? Yes. There's the quiet part. The part where she sometimes wonders what childhood would have felt like if she had been allowed to be fragile too. The part where the mother occasionally says, "I wish I had done it differently." The part where healing is incomplete but honest. And here's the final twist, my friends. The original AITA post? Most people said she wasn't wrong. But a surprising number said something else. They said, "You're not wrong for leaving. But if you ever go back different." And that's exactly what she did. She didn't go back as the fixer. She went back as a person with boundaries. And boundaries? Boundaries don't destroy families. They reveal whether the family can survive without control. So now I'll ask you one last thing. If someone always saw you as the strong one, would you keep carrying that weight? Or would you put it down and see who you are without it? Tell me, my friends. Because this wasn't just about AITA. It was about who you become when you finally stop playing the role assigned to you.